The Kipande was a small red book. It was put in a small metallic container. That container was the size of a cigarette box. Africans wore it around their necks, and they wore it outside of their confined areas, outside of the reserves. The Africans hated that Kipande. They called it a goat's bell. And they did that because it signaled that the goat was out of the shed. Mbuzi ametoka kwa boma. The African is out of the reserve. Welcome to Nahashon Kimeme Live. Thank you to all my 1,080 subscribers. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share these videos. Do not hide a light where there is darkness. This is part 1. The history of the identification system in Kenya. Birth registrations, they came way back in 1904, just after the Europeans arrived. We used to recognize the births of people. Guys used to dance. We used to have parties. These guys came with the registration. And the initial process, it was limited to Europeans, the first-class citizens. And then they moved that birth registration to Asians, the second-class citizens. And then finally, it came to the African, to the third-class citizen. Today, a birth certificate is required to enroll in school and to sit in examinations. The Kipande system was first passed by law in 1915. Then came World War I from 1914 to 1918, also known as the Great War. Soon after it ended, an ordinance was passed in 1919. It was known as the Native Registration Amendment Ordinance of 1920. It targeted all men African above the age of 15 years. Others say 16 years. By law, you could not leave your reserve without that Kipande. There were stiff penalties and even jail term for an African found without a Kipande. The Kipande included everything: the record of your name, your fingerprint, your ethnic group, your employment history, your employer's signature, the amount of wages that you earned, every information that was necessary at that time. The Kipande system had it, and had it for the African. Why only the African? Because there was a hidden intention behind the Kipande system. In my opinion, and in the opinion of other scholars, it was to keep track of the labor pool, the workers. That brings me to my first reason for the Kipande system: controlling the workers. If you did not report to work for some reason or the other, perhaps your master beat you, perhaps the wages were too low, perhaps you're just tired of working for the white man, well, it was easy for the government to find you and return you to work, because all the details that the government would require to find you, they were in the Kipande system. Your name, your ethnic group, your previous employer, and other details. The idea was to control the labor market. The labor market works as all markets work, the principle of demand and supply. That you can supply a job and somebody might want it. But if you do that, then it would reach what they call an equilibrium price, or in this case, an equilibrium wage, where the laborer would determine his own wage. But what good would that be to the colonialist? What if the employee demands for a wage that the colonialist does not want to pay? Perhaps he wants to pay him a lower wage. How can you interfere with the system such that you guarantee a low wage for the laborer, for the African? It's simple. Control the mobility of the labor force. Control the labor supply. Control the African. And it was easy to do, because everywhere he'd go, he'd have a goat's bell on his neck. The previous wage that he was paid, you would know that, using the goat bell on his neck. And so you'd give him a wage that's closer to that, the last one. His negotiating power, his negotiating ability is low. So why do I mention this? The Kenyan economy grew at 5.7% in 2018. The inflation rate was at 8%. Medical inflation was at 12%. What kind of growth was that? When medical inflation alone is more than double the GDP growth rate. What kind of worker would work in such a system? Would they not demand more wages when the inflation rate is at 8% and the economy is growing at 5.7%? They would. But how can you control them? How can you ensure that they work in the worst possible conditions without demanding higher wages? It's simple. You control their movement, you control them. And I wanted to just to give an example of this.